That's fine, Travis. Thanks.
Chair Joe, I just wanted to point out to you on the agenda that there's 2 consent calendar items that I kept separate from item number 5 because there may be some discussion as well as approval.
The policies, payroll, accrual rates, and financial standards. Okay.
It's the second bucket of the employee handbook that we introduced to the board last time.
Right. So that'll be a separate action item and looking for a motion for that one as well.
Correct.
You got that, Chair?
Oh, then there's this one here. Mr. Happy Short Timer.
Hey, you got both of those right.
Uh-huh.
Well, short timer in what? In life? I hope not.
No.
70 down, 30 to go.
Yeah. I'm not going to call a meeting to order till we have a quorum, but yeah, Joe, you know what I did is I went to and I know we're being recorded and I really don't care. So there's I was sitting in my dining room table and I have a sliding glass door that looks to the front of the house, and I've got a very large wood cedar deck at the front of the house where the main door is. And there's a squirrel that has been raiding our plants on the front porch. Well, that sucker comes across the banister and starts eating my succulents they're protected under the eave of the house, right?
Right.
So it's like, you know what? I'm not going to put up with that. So I'm in my bare feet and my pajamas. I open up the front door and I go tearing across the deck, and it had been raining. And so the next thing I know is I see the tops of my feet in front of me.
No.
Oh yeah, I went straight out from underneath I got air and landed straight down on my back.
No.
And then
Are
hit
you
my
okay?
head. And I hit my head. And I went out for just a little bit. Next thing I know, I see Mary's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And I'm just like, don't touch me," because it knocked the wind out of me too. So my back has been really, really sore.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry to hear that.
And that was,
Didn't you say you had an incident like that hunting once where you ended up on your back and you're in the middle of nowhere?
yeah, that was where I had a elk quarter, a hind quarter on my back, and I was crossing a creek and I hit a slippery rock, and I was my backpack held me to the water.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm floundering like a turtle.
Well,
So
I'm sorry to hear that, Joe. I got one leg and I'd be more than happy to help you out. One cripple to another.
We can lean on each other. All right, do we have a quorum yet? I better shut up here. Okay, 1, 2. We do have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 6, right? Yeah, we got a quorum. Hi, Janine. Hello, Terry. Good to see you. So we can go ahead and I'll call a meeting to order with roll call. Travis, please.
Sure, yeah. So joining us here today, we have Chair Joe Piscineri, Vice Chair Janine Parisi, Board Member Mike Fleck, Board Member Howard Saxon, Board Member Joe Burney, Board Member Terry Fitzpatrick. Also present from LRAPA staff, Steve Dietrich, myself, Travis Knudsen, Colleen Wagstaff, Beth Erickson, Cassandra Jackson, Debbie Weinlinger, Julie Lindsay, Katie Eagleson, Lance Giles, Max Huffley, Robbie Robinson, and Trinidad Carnitas. And also with us is Lydia, who is our minutes recorder, and Jim Daniels, the chair of the CAC. And that is all present at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Travis. So good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. So we've called a meeting to order. So is there anybody have any adjustments to the agenda? Seeing none, moving on. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make comments in regards to today's agenda?
Don't see any members of the public, but if there's someone who would like to participate in the public participation portion, please raise your hand and I'll unmute you to do so. And the link I put in the chat is a link to the agenda for today in case helpful to anybody.
Well, that was nice, Travis. Good job. So no one from the public. Moving on to the next item is going to be any comments from the board in regards to today's agenda? Okay. The next action item is going to be number 4 with the consent calendar. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar. Howard's made a motion by raising his hand on the Zoom thing. Do I have a second? Or was that a question, Howard?
Well, both.
Oh, okay. Well, then let's hold off on the motions. And then what is your comment?
Well, I have a question. As far as employee expenses, I noticed it's, if I remember correctly, it's running about 5 or 6% above where it would be on a straight linear curve as far as spending. And I was just curious, do you have a projection as to where labor expenses will wind up at the end of the fiscal year?
Go ahead, Julie.
Yeah, hang on just a second.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, thanks, Travis. I actually haven't done the whole year's projections yet, but those would be actuals from July, August, September, October. I don't have everything in October completely closed yet. So I'll have to, can I get back to you on that in regards to what the whole year is going to look like? Because we have a vacancy that we are going to fill.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just, wondering what it looked like.
Okay.
Especially since labor is the largest expense item. I know you guys track that carefully, but I was just curious.
Okay. Yep. Let me look at it as a whole.
Thank you.
You're muted, Joe, and I'll second, by the way.
I just saw it. I had that thing flash in front of me. Do you have any more questions, Howard?
No, I had no others. Thank you.
Okay. So let's entertain a motion to accept the consent calendar.
I move that we accept the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilor Fleck and seconded by Howard Saxon with a late second from Terry. So all those in favor signify by raising your hands or saying aye.
Aye.
Looks like all the board members have raised their hands. Any opposed? Seeing none, this motion is carried unanimously. The second item would be a separate action item for number 5, approval of updated policies, payroll and accrual rates for the financial system upgrade. Who's going to take that? That Steve or Julie?
Yeah, I can, Chair Joe, members of the board, I can introduce it, but this topic
Steve.
was introduced to the board and
Hang on, Steve, just a second. I'm sorry. Janine, you have your hand up? No, okay, go ahead, Steve.
okay. This topic was actually presented to the board in October's board meeting as part of the new business during the October 13th meeting. And it was the second installment or second bucket, if you will, of looking at employee handbook changes. If you recall, it was in strike through and red form for you to review in the hopes that we could actually approve this, if at all possible today, so that we can continue with our quest to get ready for the Cassell change into the new finance system, which this helps accomplish that goal by January. I'll pause there.
Okay, and I think, Janine, do you want to have a question regarding the policies now?
Sure, thank you. I am prepared to approve these. I just wanted to mention, and I can't remember if this was in the previous set that we looked at as well, but just as a just general theme, there's some language in there about being open for business for citizens. And I just have this personal preference that I hope the rest of the board will agree that we're open for business for residents or customers, and that citizen implies citizenship. And I don't think that's your intention. I just am hoping that we try to just look at the language and be as inclusive as possible. So that was my one little nitpicky comment. And hopefully that if the rest of the board agrees, that's an easy search and replace if folks are comfortable with that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Janine. I see people thumbs up, whatnot. I also agree, and I think maybe a substitute word could be public. Members of the public. Which wouldn't be all inclusive. Sound good?
Sounds
All right.
good.
Janine, that's the spirit of what you're saying there?
Yep, I wasn't suggesting a particular word, just wanted to substitute from implying citizenship, that's all. Thank
All
you.
right, that's fine. Howard, do you have something?
With regards to the policies, I know this is for what we're talking about today is for non-exempt or I guess non-salaried staff, but I was curious, I don't remember in the previous policy if it talked about exempt employees and what the policies were as far as comp time if someone had to work extra hours and they're salaried. Is that in the employee handbook or is that in your financial system? How's that tracked?
Actually, I can address that. So in this set of policies, we do designate exempt and non-exempt. So staff has been given a letter last July 1st with some other information of what their position is classed as. This set of policies, because the payroll system is going to require this, does outline who is eligible for overtime, who's eligible for comp time, and at what level. These also highlight our normal working hours and identify and explain the exempt, non-exempt, and also whether you're full-time, regular part-time, or non-benefited part-time or temporary. And we also address the FLSA, which is the Fair Labor Standard Act, in this group of policies.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah, and the new system will have a timesheet, and the timesheets will be built based on what your job class is.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board in regards to this action item? Okay, Steve, are you done?
I have a quick question. So
Oh,
we
sure.
looked at a lot of other policies last month, but I don't think we approved those. I didn't think we took action on those last month. And
I thought we did.
did we approve those? I didn't remember. I thought that was, we were just looking at them and they were being approved the next month, but
Go ahead, Steve.
I probably should have read the minutes better, but
So Chair Joe, members of the board, Janine, to answer your question, it's the first bucket or the first batch was all the laws that have changed in Oregon that we really couldn't change the laws. So it was a pretty easy, let's approve the new laws type of action, which I think we did.
Yeah, it's just a matter of conforming to the law as opposed to making a decision to change. Although we did a consent, I think it was by consensus as opposed to a formal. Okay, let's see. It's been moved. Yeah, it was moved and seconded by Howard. It was moved by you, Janine, and seconded by Howard at the time, according to the chat.
And just a point of order, that includes the requested change that Janine mentioned as far as changing citizen to public or an appropriate language.
Yeah, but that motion hasn't been done yet.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm sorry.
Mike,
Yeah, I guess just a quick question on the 3 floating holidays. You know, we go into quite a bit on the PTO time, and I guess I'm just wondering if there's a little background on why we're adding the 3 extra floating holidays.
Yeah, so I can start with that, and then Steve, you can add if you'd like. So what the old policy manual had was a floating holiday during the Christmas holiday time. And what we ran into was, depending on people's work schedules, it was really hard to schedule that day off, but it was very restricted. So we made it a more general floating holiday so that we can recognize other holidays that folks may want off. And then we also looked at DEQ's policy manual, and we tried to balance with DEQ's in regards to all the vacation schedule as well as the floating holidays and their holidays off.
That answer your question, Mike? Okay.
Yeah.
For Janine, did you have
Julie,
any-
you're
any more?
saying
Yeah.
that the state offers 3 floating holidays in addition to the standard holiday calendar that you have, plus the PTO. So
Right.
you're trying to be as consistent with paid time off as the state is.
Right. One of the differences though is we are using the PTO where you'll run into others that use the sick and the vacation separate.
Sure.
So, and ours is under PTO. And like I said, one of the floating holidays LRAPA had,
Sure.
it was just so restricted.
Yeah. So eWeb has 12 hours of floating holiday, just for reference. So I'd say that's 3 days is pretty generous. I don't know what either cities do, but
Yeah. And I'd have to look at like the vacation accrual schedule.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, our vacation accruals are also not as generous.
okay.
But you do okay in other areas.
Yeah. Mhm. It all balances out, Joe. You make choices in life, right?
Boy,
does
isn't that the truth?
Yeah, there is some differences between represented versus non-represented employers as well. So that comes into play sometimes.
I have a real quick question going to the materials, and it indicates that the employees record their hours worked and hours not worked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I probably missed it, but is that on a weekly basis that they do that, or monthly? How often do they record those? And part of that recording, is there a statement of I'm looking for truthfulness in regards to those hours?
Right. So currently we pay on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
But the new system has asked us to go to every 2 week.
Okay.
So very common, as you are upgrading
Right.
your payroll system, they want everybody on every 2 week, mainly to make sure that the FLSA overtime is paid correctly, and being on an every 2 week payroll, that helps that. So we are actually prepping to go that way as we start building this system.
Okay, and that's what I thought. I thought there might be some changes here, but also when they do, that's electronic recording, correct? It's not,
Yes.
okay. And then that electronic recording, is there a statement of affirmation when they submit those hours?
Yes, and we haven't got to all the details because actually working with the city of Eugene and Springfield, when we did this, there were differences between the two cities. So we will be asking for either electronic signature and or printed hard copy signature. And then it'll also require a supervisor approval. So it'll be a workflow, and currently that's all done by hand. We are hoping to get it more electronic.
Okay, good. So then the other last part, I hate to beat a dead horse here, but on the last part too, is that because of this little change, whatnot, is those changes in regards to including the affirmation of the hours, is there does it address if there is an error made in those hours? Is that addressed in the rule book specifically?
Actually, I believe it is written in there. I'll have to search for that because sometimes there are unintentional errors.
Of course.
But we are hoping to build the system to where it highlights those prior to an employee approving it. So in other words, if you're not accounting for 40 hours this week, the system isn't going to let you submit your timesheet.
Right. And I'm familiar with those type of electronic
Yeah.
programs. But what I'm saying is, let's say, for example, I don't think anything is happening now, but down the road, you have a over-reported of hours, and it's discovered down the road, and then that over-report of hours, and is there a mechanism or trigger device to where we can go to that staff member and say, okay, we have a problem here, and so is LRAPA covered in regards to if there's a finding of intentional error or intentional misrecording of hours, to where there's LRAPA can fall back on that saying, hey, we got your signature that says these hours are, you're affirming that these hours are truthful and that by signing this, you agree.
Right. So I'm searching as we're talking in this group. It doesn't appear that error or intentional is in here, but I believe it's in the 2013 handbook. So just so everybody knows, what we've done is taken the 2013 handbook and we've broken it up. So you saw the set that belongs to law. You're seeing this set that belongs more to building our new system. Then there's a whole nother set of policies, some examples, the drug policy, the use of vehicle policy. There's probably more personnel policies. Those are coming. And so Chair Joe, I can find the one that talks about that and who can approve your timesheet and things like that. It doesn't appear that it's in here, or at this point, I'm not finding it really quickly, but I
No,
will
and that's
find it
fine.
for-
I'm not trying to say, I want to see it right now. I'm just saying is that I want to make sure that that is something in there. So in case that something unfortunate like that was to happen, that LRAPA has a tool in which to address that's effective and protects the interests of our taxpayers.
Yes, I
Okay.
will.
So I mean, basically initiating a discipline process.
Yep. And I will continue to search for that. I do believe it's still in a policy that you have yet to see.
Just need to make sure is all. Okay, thank
Yep.
you. That's good. Any other comments from any other board member on this topic? Steve, are you done on this action item?
I am, and this is, I'm glad you guys took the time to read it, and now we can act on it.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to approve action item number 5.
I'll move.
It's been moved by Howard Saxon. I hear a second. Been seconded by Councillor Fleck. All those in favor, please indicate so by raising your hand or stating aye. Aye. Okay, looks like all those present have approved it and any opposed. Can't double vote. So carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is going to be the reports. Aerometrics, you're up.
Yes, so Chair Joe, members of the board asked to see a current business plan for Aerometrics. We've prepared a PowerPoint presentation. It's about 15, 16 slides that highlights some of the details in the Aerometrics business plan, which was also included in your board packet, the business plan itself. So there's going to be 3 of us going through these slides. And I'm ready to start if you're ready.
Let it roll.
Okay. Chair Joe, members of the board, it's been a while since LRAPA has shared an updated Aerometrics plan with you. We plan to run through about 16 slides to provide you an update. Next slide. So here is our agenda. I will present the first 2 slides, which corresponds to the first 4 agenda items you see here. And then Trinidad will then walk us through the next 5 slides covering the next 2 agenda items. And then, of course, Julie will go over the financial overview consisting of 5 or 6 slides. And then I will provide the next steps and try to answer any questions you may have at the end. Next slide. So on with the agency overview. So as you know, LRAPA began in 1968 using the Partners IGA and is charged with protecting and maintaining clean air in Lane County. Now, Aerometrics is an enterprise fund managed by LRAPA as a local government agency in Lane County. So just as a review, under the state of Oregon, enterprise funds are used by many government agencies to provide goods and services to the general public. And most or all of the costs to operate are funded from charges for those services. Aerometrics is in LRAPA's budget as its own fund. The revenues from Aerometrics activities cover the costs to operate and has a reserve balance. And you see some of the products that they are actually used that Aerometrics supplies. Next slide. So for the Aerometrics Enterprise Fund, we have objective and strategy, as well as goals and keys to success. For the overall objective, we wanted to increase awareness of the products and services offered by Aerometrics through various ways and relationships and partnerships. Our strategy has always had a technical element in the specialized products, accessories, and services to a specific market at a lower price. Customers are worldwide and include agencies, consultants, industry, and academia. Goals include maintaining a self-sustaining enterprise fund. Research and development is included in the budget, while we want to maintain the required fund reserves and be able to review annual markets to increase sales and prices and services, not necessarily prices, but services rather. Some keys to success, though, depend on, again, research and development and innovation, staying in touch with market needs, growth, and continuous operational improvement. So I'm going to pause there because the next few slides, Trinidad is going to take us through the next couple of agenda items.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. So as Steve mentioned, I'm just going to go over 5 or 6 slides, a product overview, some research that has been conducted with the Mini-Ball Taz, market position where we stand against our competitors, SWOT analysis, a simple SWOT analysis, and some identified concerns. So the Airmetrics Enterprise Fund was created to serve the global community by manufacturing an air sampler that is used to inform the public about air quality concerns. Mini-Ball Taz is a pump controlled by a programmable timer, which can be set up to run 6 times or 24 hours throughout 1 week. The Mini-Ball Taz is equipped to operate by either AC power, you can plug it into a regular power source, your outlet, or it can be set up to run with a lithium-ion battery. The sampler is equipped with 2 fault circuits, a low battery circuit that automatically shuts the sampler down should the sampler fail or the voltage drop below a certain point, and a low flow circuit. If the sampler drops 10% below the original set point, it will shut off. Now that's really crucial because the data that you want to get from your sampler is reliant on the amount of time that the sampler was running. So both of those faults are imperative. In particulate matter sampling mode, air is drawn through a particle size separator. Here's the PM 2.5 impactor, a PM 10 impactor. So it's drawn through a particle size separator and then through a filter medium. Particle size separation is achieved by impaction. Anything bigger than the particle size that you're looking to collect is impacted on this plate, and everything else flows through this perfectly designed impactor. Another option that we offer is air toxic sampling, and that is achieved with an adapter and the use of polyurethane cartridges. I don't have a puff cartridge to share with you today, but I can show you the adapter that would be set on the sampler, placed on the inlet, and it would allow toxic sampling. So the Mini-Ball was the first portable air sampler and creator of the saturation sampler market. By design, the device is small, portable, and easy to set up and operate. It lends itself to numerous applications. Next slide, please, Travis. So here are some research projects where the Mini-Ball was involved. One of the most significant archaeological events of the 20th century was the discovery of Emperor Qin's terracotta warriors. Basically, they were unearthed in 1974, and there was a museum built around these terracotta warriors. Through research conducted with the Mini-Ball Taz, they were able to find out that highly acidic aerosols were present in the museum's atmosphere. That, when combined with high temperature, relative humidity, and solar radiation, will erode the terracotta warriors. So this is just a contribution to preserving historical artifacts by the Mini-Ball. Another research project that was recently completed is the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute conducted research to find a way to produce green fireworks, environmentally friendly fireworks. The Indian Diwali festival is celebrated by setting off fireworks, which is a mass emission of pollutants. These green fireworks that were created through their research reduce the emissions by 30%. Utah Lake, the third largest lake west of the Mississippi, is suffering from harmful algal blooms triggered by the presence of phosphorus. Brigham Young University is using the mini Voltaz to test total phosphorus deposit on the lake and how much of it is soluble. So when you have harmful algal blooms, that really affects the way that you can recreate on a lake. It's dangerous for wildlife, your pets. So again, just another way that the sampler contributes to staying informed about public health. In 2020, the University of Aveiro in Portugal, they used the mini-vol to identify and come up with a new process for identifying natural and synthetic microfibers, as well as microplastics in indoor and outdoor air. The aim of the research was to produce a simple protocol to determine concentrations of airborne microplastics. And one other really interesting to me research that was being conducted in 2016, a study was performed by the United States Forest Service in Portland, where they collected moss samples around the city. And the United States Forest Service found that cadmium was at the highest concentrations near the Bullseye glass manufacturing facility. Cadmium is a top concern of the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. To understand what was in the air, they deployed a fleet of samplers, including the mini Voltaz, to find out what exactly was going on around the facility. So these are just some of the uses of the mini Voltaz, in addition to what you might expect for regulatory purposes. Next slide, please, Travis. So this is where we are positioned against our competitors. This is the mini Voltaz market position map. You're going to see 7 substitute products. The 8th is the mini Voltaz. So on the right side, you have the versatility scale. The size of the bubble on the map is proportionate to the amount of features included in that sampler. So for example, the NFRM sampler, it embodies all 8 of the features on the versatility scale. Hence, it's the biggest bubble versus the lower end of the scale. You'll see smaller samplers, smaller bubbles, meaning that they have less features. So the mini Voltaz has 4. You're gonna notice that it's portable. It utilizes the gravimetric method, which is a filter-based sampler. It's weatherproof and it's very cost effective. The price range is $3,000 to $12,000 for the products indicated on this map. Next slide, please, Travis. Here we have strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. In fact, the weaknesses will kind of be highlighted a little bit on the next slide. But for strengths, the Airmetrics brand carries a lot of weight. We've been in the industry for 30 years. Our price is very competitive. In fact, it's probably the most competitive price out there versus price and feature comparison. So our customer retention, we've had 11 out of our 15 current distributors be with us for the entirety of my employment. So they've been around for quite some time. We keep producing products and service that brings them back. Our capital is probably our most undervalued strength. We have high reserves that could be utilized to further the product, make it more innovative. Agency affiliation. This is something that I can't overstate the value of having a team that is affiliated with the local air quality agency. Having their expertise it really can't be overstated. Our service, again, we have repeat customers, so they like the way we do business and we appreciate their business. We have a new website that's wrapping up as we speak. It's not too far out from launching. So another strength that will draw customers in. Weaknesses, again, will be, I'll go over that on the next slide. Opportunities. So research and development is another really big opportunity for us. We have the capital to invest and potentially further ourselves in the market by adding features and just making a better package than we currently offer. Grants, this is something that we have not capitalized on recently. 2008 and 2009, I believe, we did have a couple grants that allowed us to travel to Japan and China and exhibit at conferences for their local, I'm sorry. We traveled there to exhibit our products and give everybody a demonstration of what our samplers can do. Partnerships. We really have the ability to partner with existing companies that would be able to allow us to license products that potentially would put us ahead in the competitive scheme. New distributors. We're always trying to get new distributors, have our product out there. Marketing. We're capitalizing on the available options that we have now. There's probably some more that we could do. Community engagement. That's an opportunity that I believe we can go back to the saturation, something similar to the saturation monitor repository. This is something that's in the business plan, and I think that we could do something on a smaller scale locally. Threats, COVID-19, that really can't be overstated. That's something that continues to plague our sales. Our patent, we have been expired since 2011. Availability of products, availability of components and parts, that's something that we are struggling with. The supply chain has really been disrupted in China. As recent as November 9th, yesterday, the day before that, we had a lockdown in Guangzhou. Our distributor in China is located in Guangzhou, which is a manufacturing hub. That is a problem. Our competitors are coming into the market with new technology. They have sleeker packages and enhanced capabilities. So these are threats that should be addressed. Transportation, by that, the International Air Transport Association regulates the transport of dangerous goods. Our lithium-ion batteries are classified as a dangerous good. For that reason, it makes it hard to service customers in countries where we can't ship standalone batteries. So if they bought our samplers 5 years ago and they need to buy 30 or 40 batteries to service them, we have to find ways to get them to the customers. Currently, what I'm doing for that situation is offering free calibration service. So what that means, they can send their sampler in, and in the return shipment, I will include the batteries. That is okay under IATA regulations. And the global economy, we're all connected. When COVID hit, it really hit the global economy. I mean, it hit everybody. So we struggled with that. Next slide,
Chair?
please, Travis.
Chair?
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Hey, Trinity, I don't mean to be rude. And
Sure.
could you go back to the other slide? And if you're going to hit something later, just tell me, shut up, Joe, I'm going to get to it later.
Hang it.
One, outdated technology as a weakness and an expired patent. That to me sounds alarm bells. Am I seeing something wrong?
So outdated technology, I will address that on the next slide, but
Okay.
the expired patent doesn't necessarily, it's not as big of a threat as you might expect, just because there's a lot of instruments that have similar features and they operate in a similar manner. And really our patent was based on the way that we used to collect gaseous samples. Our current sampler doesn't have that feature integrated. So really the sampler that we discontinued in 2007 is what the patent really encompassed. That was a way of drawing air in for the gaseous sampler.
Thank you.
That's
And
no longer.
strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That to me, I now have seen more of that type of way of looking at things in the government sector. So help me with this. How big is the market for this stuff? I mean, what is the market? And of that market, what percent do we now control? And of that market, in terms of dollars, numbers, what's the goal and how do we get there?
I'm going to be honest with you about that. So we are not a big player in this market. The big players are Tisch Scientific, Thermo Fisher, Met1, Teledyne. You have companies that make instruments that are a lot more sophisticated than ours. There's a lot of data readily available for these companies and those sales. For the smaller market, which we are a part of, the niche market, you can't really, or at least I haven't found readily available the data that I would be able to answer the questions that you just asked.
Okay,
I do
so
know.
You can't tell me how big the market is right now. Dollars.
Specifically for our niche market, I wouldn't be able to have those numbers for you. I'm sure there's probably a way to source and pay for them, but I don't have that right now.
And finally, Chair, and thank you for this indulgence, Trinidad. I'm aware of several companies in Lane County that have multi-million-dollar grants. I forget the name of the program, but it's a federal program to help you develop a new product for market. My guess is you're very familiar with it. And is this something that you've looked into to move forward with a new form of this product and capture a market that you don't know what exists?
This is great. No, I'm actually not familiar with the companies or with the grants that are available that you just mentioned.
Okay,
These are discussions that I've had with Julie recently. And again, we are in the process of making a new hire that will hopefully be able to assist with grants and seeking opportunities that I am not aware of.
okay. Last, a new hire is often seen as a silver bullet. I don't believe in silver bullets to solve problems. I think it's great you're going to hire someone, but whether I'm currently holding office or not, come to me, please. I'm inviting you to. I think what you have would qualify for some of these big dollar grants that are available and that some of our local companies are benefiting from.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Joe. Thank you. And I'm right in line with your thinking. I don't think there's such thing as a silver bullet. But again, this is a hire for the agency, and I will hopefully, Airmetrics will hopefully benefit from that hire as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Sorry to interrupt, Trinidad.
Oh, no. Anytime, please. And these are some identified concerns. Airmetrics is currently at a business crossroads. Due to market conditions, sales have decreased, costs continue to increase, and the main product, our primary product, the Minivol, is quickly becoming obsolete. Not only the sampler itself, but the components. Again, the availability of parts is really becoming a challenge. But reduced sales. So again, the COVID pandemic has dramatically decreased sales since fiscal year 2019. On average, we're selling 90 less units into Asia countries. That translates into $336,000 approximately of missed revenue. At some point, that we got to recover that, and I do believe that's going to happen. But again, these lockdowns, when they're happening as recently as a couple of days ago, we don't control that. We will work through it. The market gap, we're slowly losing our competitive edge because of our lack of innovation. I mean, I've been selling the same product for 30 years. This particular sampler was launched in 2007, 2008. So that's 14, 15 years of the exact same sampler for the most part. We did in 2017 upgrade from through-hole components to surface mount components, but even still, we're running against the same obsolescence issues that we faced then. Our costs are increasing to ensure viability, and it's vital to invest in research and development as well as key roles. So for key roles, I would think of a designer, a product designer, a software designer. We lost a vital piece of R&D, in-house R&D in 2010 when there was a separation between Airmetrics and LRAPA. Hopefully we can regain some of that R&D soon in one way or another. Break even. Our break-even point, in order to break even based on projected sales and costs for fiscal year 23, specific to the Minivol TAS, our production process, sales need to average 11 units per month, which equates to 132 units per year. We're unfortunately not going to meet that this year, but I'm confident we will bounce back. Product concerns. I've kind of been saying this for a little bit, but the Minivol TAS is slowly becoming obsolete due to its outdated technology. It's becoming harder to find the parts that we once used to build the sampler. We're having to find substitute parts. We come across issues when you have a substitute part because they don't always function the exact same. They might have the same specs, but one manufacturer compared to another one, you might find differences. That completes my portion of this. I'm sure there's probably some questions. Hopefully I can address anything that you would like to know. Travis, thank you.
Questions or comments from the board? And Travis, if you can take the share screen, I'll be able to expand mine so I can see everybody.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's still more presentation.
Oh, there is.
Ahead. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's still.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, let's get rolling then.
Okay. So, and Travis, you can go to the next slide. So we wanted to just highlight the fact that Airmetrics, being an enterprise fund, does have several revenue sources. The sampler sales that Trinidad has really focused on is just one part of the revenue. That fund also sells parts and accessories separate from the sampler. Also, there's some calibration services, and then we have miscellaneous revenues such as interest earned. So we are split our revenue in 4 different sources, each having its own opportunities. And Travis, you can go to the next slide. So just to give you a high level picture of the expenses coming out of that fund, a lot of it is cost of goods sold, so directly related to the manufacturing of the sampler that is sold. However, there are some other direct costs that are related, as well as our personnel costs. So not only is Trinidad's wages charged there, but you have portions of me and Steve and my finance staff. The grant analysts that we are hiring, hopefully to get started this next week, will be focusing on LRAPA and Airmetrics to try to increase some of our grant opportunities. So we'll be reaching out to you guys. And so part of that person's wages under the grant will be also covered through Airmetrics. There is some general expenses charged to that fund, as well as a transfer at the end of the year for indirect costs for LRAPA as a whole. So that at this point, that transfer is still happening. And then next slide. So bottom line for Airmetrics, and I think one of the points that Trinidad was making was Airmetrics has a healthy balance available. At this point, there is still $1.2+ million in the bank. And that has helped Airmetrics kind of get through the last couple of years due to the COVID shutdowns. And slowly though, what you're going to see in our next slide, slowly we have got to do some calculations and some figuring out what the next steps are for this enterprise fund, because as with everything, we can't continue to draw down on that balance available. And general fund is not available to Airmetrics in order to balance. So with that, we'll go to the next step slides, and I'm going to pass it back over to Steve.
Yeah, so this is the last slide, and then we can get to questions. So you've heard a lot of information, you've seen a lot of information. Just need to touch on the next steps that are possible going forward for Airmetrics, because it's already been mentioned that we're kind of at a crossroads, a business crossroad. So there are a number of options here in no particular order, but the first 3 here: continue operating as is and focus on recovering sales. And then the second one, invest in proprietary development of upgrades and or new products that offer additional benefits. And then the third one here, enter into partnership agreements that allow Airmetrics to add developed products under the Airmetrics name. And that's the 3 options that we would spend the most time in, and as well as some of the grant ideas to help make that possible that Commissioner Joe Burney just mentioned. But then last, and hopefully we never have to go to this, is dissolve the enterprise fund. We're not in such a financial bind that that's a reality right now. So the last slide is just whatever your questions are, which you've already asked quite a few of them already. So that's the end of our presentation.
Anybody have any questions, comments? I have, so go ahead, Joe.
Oh, well, I spoke last. I saw Mike had his hand up.
Oh, now it is.
Go ahead, Mike, if you want.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I guess, I don't know how many of you guys were on when Everybody Wins was part of LRAPA. And it should have been Everybody Wins but LRAPA, because boy, did we lose our shirt doing it. It was a great proposal to have, small motors run to charge diesel trucks instead of their big motors. And, it's a great idea. Unfortunately, the way it was structured and the way we operated, we lost a ton of money. So I have to say that I'm totally okay waiting to see how it goes and eating into reserves a little bit for the short term. But I do really, I am concerned that if this does, continue this trend, that we're going to have to look at dissolving. I'm not interested in partnerships or You know, I mean, if we have the capacity as an agency to develop new products amongst ourselves, I'm totally supportive of doing that. I'm not interested in private partnerships or those sorts of things. That's just kind of my 2 cents at this point. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Joe, and then Janine.
Um, Gosh, what I'm going to say after what Mike said, I'm afraid to say it.
No, you're not.
Yeah, that's my preface. So thanks a lot, Joe. I can't get away with anything with you. Something I didn't see on that board, and that is you probably know this, but I don't. So it's to identify the 1 or 2 largest distributors for this type of product around globally. To sit with them and discuss what modifications on Aerometrics would interest them in then representing the product globally, and then develop a partnership arrangement. I've seen people make a lot of money doing something like this, and I didn't see that as an option here. And maybe there's a good reason, but anyway, that's all.
Do anybody have a response to that? Perhaps Steve or or Trinidad?
Certainly, yeah, no, that's great, Joe. Actually, you might remember, it might have been last January, one of the meetings that I attended, and you mentioned something along the lines of looking into a partnership. I haven't fully explored and gotten a signed contract, but I do think that we do have options to do something exactly like what you just described. I did do a soft search, and I have made a couple phone calls, and I think there'd be mutual interest. So,
oh, good. So I'm not totally off base. Hey,
no, I mean, that's just due diligence. You kind of have to look what your next step is going to be. You have to find an opportunity. I mean, we have a sampler that we've been selling. So,
well,
no.
Trinidad, by the time you develop any options, I will not be an elected official. I'm much better without those boundaries placed on me. So if you get to a point where you're literally negotiating a deal and you want a little help so you don't leave anything on the table, I'm around.
Again, that's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Janine.
A couple things so I threw in the chat Business Oregon. If you're going to be looking for grant funding, I would start with them. They are the economic arm of the state, and they do have lots of money that's come in through the federal government and through the state that they're looking to get out. So Melissa Murphy's the person that I've worked with, but they're hiring lots of staff, and Joe, you may have better contacts at Business Oregon who might, my contacts are more on the water and electric side, but they do everything from fiber to, anyway, I would really recommend having a sit down. They are very open to conversations. They're looking to grow jobs and industry in Oregon, and it feels like there's opportunities there. I also wonder about partnerships with Oregon State University or U of O in terms of product development, and kind of like, it feels to me that it's a foregone conclusion that if you don't innovate, your current trajectory is going to continue, right? When Minivol started, you were the only product like this in the market. That's not the case anymore. So if you stagnate, you're out of the market and you're just gonna spend the money that you have, trickling along. And that's okay, as long as we have an exit strategy where we just cut the cord and say, okay, we're done. But I think we have to make a conscious decision that you either invest in innovation or you cut the cord in 3 years and give everyone a ramp. And it's a thoughtful disinvestment, right? So we thoughtfully dissolve the enterprise fund. But doing what we're doing continuously without a business plan doesn't make sense to me, to either innovate or the alternative. So I think you're absolutely right. You're at a crossroads. Let's make the decision. To help with that decision, it would be good to know how much would you want to, what's the investment level to do that next innovation, like if we, and it doesn't have to be like, hey, we have $1.2 million, we're going to sink it into this, innovation fund, but it would be good to know like, hey, if I had 10% of that, I could do this, this, and this. So it's really hard for me to, make any like thoughtful recommendations about a trajectory forward if I don't know what the level of investment would need to kind of help us break through to be more competitive in the market. So, and maybe that's just better marketing, right? Like that could be a piece of it. Last comment would be just a question about the technology. You were talking about the other add-ons that some of the competitors have. VOCs, I could see some value there. Can you also, are there products on the market that are measuring carbon? I mean, I just think about the market and what people are trying to measure in the atmosphere, and it feels like carbon might be a place where there could be high levels of interest in kind of localized data there. So is that an option?
Some of the samplers do offer those features. Yeah, again, so that would be something that we would have to find out how that could be integrated into our sampler and if it's worth it, how much it would cost to do that. So again, that's more along the lines of maybe finding a just add water situation where somebody is willing to give us an already developed sampler, and what we do is put our name on it, hopefully with a very a mutually beneficial situation where we can make money off it and they can make money off it. And it's not necessarily money, but we're helping more people find the solutions they're looking for when they're trying to abate stuff or keep the environment healthy.
I have a couple real basic questions. Is Airmetrics fully self-supported? One. Two, is LRAPA putting any money into it, and is it getting money back? And three, like Janine said, is that do we have a plan B or C if this trajectory of dropping, how do we back out before it costs? So I'm okay with keeping it going. Don't get me wrong, but I want to know where LRAPA sits in the hierarchy financially to this program. And so if this program, for example, we decide, okay, we're not going to do this anymore, will it hurt LRAPA's budget or will it help it?
Right. So I can address some of that. So in my review of the LRAPA budget versus the Airmetrics budget, I believe that our costs are split appropriately. We've already been through one financial audit and nothing was highlighted. So the fund does fund one full FTE, which is Trinidad's position, and parts of Steve and some of my finance staff. I think it's around 62,000 or something. So there is some funding that if in fact Airmetrics went away, we do have a full-time employee that we would want to figure out a way to deal with, as well as partials of others. But outside of that, Airmetrics actually is in its own building. It is paying rent in its own building. It buys its own supplies. And so a lot of that is already split. So, how long do we have? Steve?
Well, the question is a real simple question. Does Airmetrics cost LRAPA money, or does Airmetrics generate enough money to support itself and eliminate any potential cost from LRAPA?
Yeah, currently it is doing that.
Okay, and so,
Yes.
and I'd heard from Trinidad that there was another employee coming on board to help with Airmetrics. Is that correct?
No, we have a grant manager
Okay.
or a grant analyst coming in.
Uh-huh.
And as we've been talking here, that person will focus on searching out these contacts and
Okay.
hoping not only for LRAPA, but for Airmetrics to see if we can get some development funds.
And I'm not raising these questions to try to undermine Airmetrics at all. It's just a matter of me and others to be very comfortable with our association with a semi-separate autonomous association of Airmetrics. And then we're talking about, like Mike raised, the concern about becoming a partner with a private entity. And then by if potentially, his hesitancy of that, and I understand that, because if Aerometrics being autonomous to LRAPA becomes going out there and having a partnership with a private agent or private company, then what kind of marriage does that create with LRAPA with that private entity? So those are just concerns. I don't need to have answers. I'm just saying that those are concerns. Are things that I would love to learn more about. So I saw Joe and followed by Howard.
I think those are, Chair, as much as I hate to say this, I think those are damn good questions that you asked. And it's very, very simple right now. From what I can tell, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, LRAPA is making money by the association at this point in time because you're getting admin, which is apparently already designated to staff. Is that correct or not?
Correct. Yeah, it does pay for some of the finance staff that if Aerometrics went away, we would have to find ways to cover it.
Okay, so that's to me, Joe, that's answer one. LRAPA benefits right now, and we're just making sure LRAPA never has a liability with this. Correct?
I'm just making sure. I want to make sure that LRAPA is not subsidizing
Exactly.
an autonomous thing. So
exactly, and I think you brought up another point, which is really legit. If Aerometrics and it's figuring out its evolution does enter into an agreement with another entity, LRAPA might want to look into creating a separate nonprofit that's wholly owned by LRAPA, but maintaining separate liabilities. I mean, really, truly, and this is probably why Mike asked the question. You can get into all sorts of business entanglements, and that's the last thing LRAPA needs to deal with directly. And yet there's ways to create a separation to ensure that doesn't occur.
Can I give some additional insight?
Oh.
Joe?
sure, you got 2 minutes.
I won't take two.
I'm
So the
kidding.
partnerships
Go
or the
ahead.
agreements that I'm talking about, they're clean agreements. So it would really just be purchasing different parts. Right now, what we do is purchase a bunch of parts and assemble the sample. We produce it, manufacture it. It just comes in a bunch of different parts and pieces. The new agreement wouldn't be anything different. I wouldn't say, I guess I'm using the term agreement or partnership, but we're not really going to sign something where if we don't hold up our end, we can be sued or there's any kind of backlash. It's really just an opportunity to buy more pieces and put it together in a different package and sell that. Just some
Thank you.
insight.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and so the city of Cottage Grove has 3 enterprise funds. We have water, wastewater, and storm. So I have, a lot of understanding about enterprise funds. And so, Joe, it is part of LRAPA, but it's a completely separate fund. And basically all activities within it are separate from the activities in the other funds. But like Julie was saying, if say that finance person is spending a quarter of their time doing work for, that fund, then a quarter of her wages are being paid for out of that fund. So that, the fact that we're losing a little bit of money out of that is coming out of the reserves is not money that's, impacting other funds at this point, because we do have those reserves to fall back on. So I just wanted to kind of share that it is still part of LRAPA, but it's a completely different fund, and enterprise funds they're like a business. I mean, so all activities within it are covered under that. And I guess, I do appreciate Joe Burning's comments that I suppose under the right circumstances, it might be worthwhile. I just know that, in some of my history of past ones, looking at Lane County and the Fiber South Consortium, absolute failed, process. And our, everybody wins, I've already mentioned, was, basically some loans that everybody defaulted on. And so we lost. So I guess I'm not saying I'm totally adamantly opposed to that, but I'm cautious. And then I also look at government and should they actually be competing with the private sector? I'm not really a big fan of government actually going in and competing. So if we're actually designing something that's enhancing the field and making a profit in it, I totally support that. But if we were just doing it to compete with the private sector, I'm less supportive. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, no, it helps me. And I do have that understanding. I just want to make sure that if the trajectory turns south on us, that we have a plan before we have to make things up. Meaning, if I don't want to get stuck with a bill. Okay.
Joe, you're muted again.
I really don't like this thing. Okay. Thank you, Trinidad, for your presentation, and Julie and Steve. And
Thank
all the
you all.
questions were good questions. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move on to item number 7, a report from the advisory committee, please.
Okay, Jim, I just promoted you to panelist, so you should be able to join us.
I'm sorry, before we get into
Yeah.
that, can I just circle back just to close the loop on this? This is a really helpful report, so I just want to thank folks for taking the time to put together the history. Tell us some of the cool research you guys have been involved with. Like, that was so eye-opening for me. I'd never heard of any of those projects, so I feel really grateful that we're kind of connected to that kind of cutting edge research. So I'm excited to hear. I was good to learn more about that. I do think we should have a placeholder for when we might check back versus just kind of like how this conversation and let it go dark. So I don't know if a 6-month check-in makes sense, or I just ask staff to, as you're planning agendas, to like think about when does it make sense for us to have a follow-up conversation, because there's some things happening, and maybe it's, you know, just part of the director's report, we get a little blurb, but I feel like there's enough content here and choices that I would personally value having something on the agenda for like a 6-month check-in. So thank you. I'm
So-
sorry I missed the opportunity to say that sooner.
That's okay. And without taking a lot of time on this, I think at minimum of an annual check-in with a similar report would be more than appropriate and easily placed in the docket. We
Right.
agree, Steve? Okay.
Yeah. You're thinking the same way we are. It's been a long time since the board's
Yeah.
heard this. So let's not make it last so long next time.
Yeah, on even on the city level, when we have contracted employees, by contract, they're supposed to check in with the council every year, and lo and behold, 4 or 5 years comes by and says, have you heard from so-and-so? So we need to make sure we get it on the calendar as a repeat item and not blow it off.
Right, and
Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we are adding a review of the enterprise fund during the budget process. So you will actually hear from Trinidad again when we get into our budget process.
Perfect. And I saw Janine with her thumbs up, and that's a big deal right there. So I'm just teasing. Okay. Let's move on to the Citizens Advisory Committee. Jim, take it away.
Okay, so you may recall last month we approved the reissuance of the permittee survey. And in our last meeting, we established 3 volunteers plus an alternate for an ad hoc committee to collate the results of the survey and to handle getting it out. It went out by email to permittees early this week. And our expectation is that probably it would be your February meeting that we could present the results, since both you and I, or you and the committee, don't meet in December. But we expect a few months and probably a reminder email to get as many people as possible in the survey. We also discussed then a possible future different branch of the survey to be available for members of the public who visit the LRAPA website. So there's that topic. And then the other timely issue, it kind of fell by the wayside, but in our bylaws for the committee, by December 1st of each year, the chairperson is to file a concise report summarizing the current year and what we would like to do in the coming year. So we need to get back to that. I have not made time yet to complete that report, but my plan is that I'll have a draft ready for the committee to review in this month's meeting, and then I'll get it to Steve by December 1st, and he will get it to you as appropriate. So that covers it.
Oh, perfect. Is there anybody got any questions for Jim? Just a comment, Jim. Thank you so much for what you're doing, and we appreciate your reports very much so. And your work does not go unnoticed for sure. And if you could express that to the rest of the committee, I'm sure the board would appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Next item, number 8.
Yes.
Take it away, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair Joe, members of the board. This is the director's report, and I'm just going to be very, very brief, just like we did last time. And I'll entertain any questions if you have any from your own review. But just going to highlight, obviously, due to local effects from wildfires like the Cedar Creek fire, you can see the extended time of the AQI at or above unhealthy for sensitive groups from August through October. In Oak Ridge alone, they were at least 37 days above any kind of AQI, which kind of prompted what the LRAPA board and we put together. It was the letter to the Forest Service and many other agencies on October 18th in support of Oak Ridge West Fir residents for their efforts and concerns. We're trying to further that anywhere we can when it comes to trying to plan for the future, because wildfires are going to be becoming more and more part of our everyday lives every year. So to be better prepared, not only to monitor, but also to help the residents in localities that are affected. So that's the biggest item I wanted to bring up in the director's report. The only other thing I was going to mention is that as a result of the public portion of the October meeting, in the last board meeting, we had individuals speak about a pending enforcement case. Since that time, we've retained legal counsel. And so most, if not all of you, have probably already should have gotten something from Mary Bridget's office on how we're proceeding on that. And that's all I had for the director's report this time, unless you have questions.
I'm good. Next item.
So the next item is we're moving into discussion and possible action portion of the agenda. It's the local dues request to IGA partners for fiscal year 24. So Julie has a few items that she wants to go over with you, to be relatively brief, so to set the stage for now and in the future on these dues.
Okay, and I think Travis is going to share screen and put up a couple charts to look at. So this is only my second year, but last year at this time we brought to you the partner fees, and I wanted to show you some of the new methodology that we have been playing with. So as you guys know, the partner fees, part of the IGA, integral part of our general fund. And there are two components actually to the partner fees. There is the base amount that the board should agree on each year. And then we take that amount and we, through the board, come up with an equitable and fair way to split that base amount up. So I have provided you with two different alternatives to look at. Previous, we had been using population and CPI. When we brought this to you last year, we had brought up the idea of adding service to the calculation. I'm sorry, is Chair Joe, are you speaking to us?
No, I'm handling a city call on site.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So the other thing that had come up last year was some conversation about some old agreements having to do with 2008, 2009, and also some in-kind agreements. One of them for example, is City of Springfield's use of Mary Bridget. We use her for our legal representation. We do not get billed for the use of Mary Bridget at this point. And in kind with Springfield, their amount that they had been billed was what I understand to be half, which also included City of Eugene and Lane County. So I, over this past year, have been working with some different methodologies, some different thoughts. I've reached out to Oak Ridge's finance manager, and I've also reached out to City of Springfield's budget manager in regards to having a conversation once this was presented to the board this month in regards to some thoughts on the methodology. So what I've done this year is there's two alternatives. One of them is basically setting the base to match the state's amount. There's an advantage to us because the state gives us in a 2-year increment. So we actually already know what the state is going to give us this next year. So we have that amount. And then what I did is I assigned 20% to population, 20% to service, and the remaining to CPI. So for the alternative one, the CPI title really doesn't mean a whole lot. However, if you look at alternative 2, what I did is I took FY23's amount, added a current CPI, which is 8.3, and then again, 20% population, 20% service, and 60% the CPI increase. And then I took each of the jurisdictions and I split it up based on like population. For example, Eugene has 49, actually it might be 46% of the population. And so that is the amount that I charged to Eugene. Doing the calculation in this way, what my hope is that we let go of some of those older agreements, because we understood there was a 10-year plan. We understood there was some thought of payback. And in speaking with the partners, brand new partners are involved, and a lot of them didn't even remember some of this. And I also received a call from City of Springfield, who asked that the in-kind service agreement go away and that we be billed gross hours for Mary Bridget in exchange for us to billing them gross for these dues. So for the board today, you're welcome to agree on one of these, welcome to add some additional ideas or research that I can bring back in January. But really the goal for us is to come up with an approved amount for FY24 that gets out to the partners in time for their budget process.
Okay, thank you, Julian. I see Janine with her hand up, and then I have a few comments after Janine.
Okay.
Just remind me, how much flexibility do we have to change the methodology for partner dues, either by the state ordinance and by our IGAs?
Well, from what I read, and Mary Bridget and I are spending quite a bit of time on this because we are looking hopefully to update our IGA soon and get some updated signatures with all the new players. But it basically says the board shall determine the percent, the estimate that feels fair and equitable to be charged, and then how it's apportioned. So unless there is some other language out there, this is the current IGA that we're working on.
And the state ordinance that enacted LRAPA that is like so specific in so many ways about the CAC and who's on it and all that, doesn't speak to membership dues at all?
Not this IGA. Now this IGA I'm holding in my hand does talk about the members and the other boards. And then it talks about the general powers of the board. And it says, now it does say March 1st, and we would say that that is a little too late for the budget processes for our partners. On or before March 1st of each year, estimate and determine the amount of money required by the agency, and then how it's allocated. is what we're reading.
And just to clarify, that's in the enabling ordinance language for LRAPA, not the IGA.
Well, this is the IGA.
No, I'm talking about the enabling ordinance.
I would have, let me get my hands on that.
Okay.
Okay, because this is the one that Mary Bridget and I had been going through. So let me see if I can find that, okay? And that's from the state,
Mhm.
okay?
Joe,
Oh, did you want, okay,
I'll go after you. It's no big deal.
okay, two questions. One question, forgive my naivete. Are not there other communities in Lane County that are bigger than Oak Ridge that are not paying dues here?
Well, so these dues are related to the 5 partners
I
That-
understand, but there's a,
that are part of the IGA, and it's Eugene, Springfield, Oak Ridge,
well,
Cottage Grove, and Lane County.
right, but there's also communities like Coburg that
Mhm.
have grown quite a bit, Junction City, etc.
Mhm.
So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I'm just thinking, I sure would, most areas, including Lane County, don't exactly have surplus budgets these days. So to just ask for increases without also looking at the environment and bringing more people in that are benefiting from LRAPA services seems sort of, I don't know. I wouldn't do it that way. But anyway, that's that, but it may be that there are rules prohibiting that. And then secondly, Steve, I know that you spoke and addressed Lane County commissioners. And as a result, this request will be much more warmly received by the administrator than had you not. In fact, I would go so far as to say, and one of the reasons why I set that up for you is I don't know if you would have gotten even half of what this request will be had that not occurred. So my question is, have you also now, because that was a while ago, had the opportunity to present to every one of the partners that we will be asking dues from at this time?
So Chair Joe, members of the board, and Commissioner Bernie, it is, short answer to that is no. And I talked to Lane County on October 11th, 2 days before the board meeting last month. And I have been diligently trying to get on the agenda for both Springfield and Eugene, involving a phone call and at least 2 rounds of emails with the right people to try to get on their agenda. And I've copied some of the board members on some of those communications. And then I've recently, just a couple of days ago, spoke to someone in Cottage Grove. And we've been visiting, trying to get on their agenda. I think I'm looking at December 12th for that.
That's great. And Joe, I'm done after this one. That's great. But forgive me because I don't know how this works, but I think every one of these cities has agenda committees. And I think you just ask the agenda committee to schedule you on an upcoming agenda. And you have people here that represent most of these cities. So I don't think it needs to be as laborious as it sounds like it is.
Unfortunately, it's what I'm running into.
Let me jump in here a little bit. So Joe, actually, it's a lot of cities are constructed a little bit different than what you're
There you
explaining.
go.
So,
Yeah.
and it's like, for example, most cities have got what they call like an agenda review committee, where they're made up of the leadership of that council, typically a mayor and an appointed counselor.
Mhm.
They can nay or yay items to put on the agenda, and the council doesn't even see it until it's on the agenda.
Right.
So they can postpone, schedule it, whatever they do, and it's out of the control of the regular governing body. So, and I have been working in the background for LRAPA for Springfield, but what keeps coming up is that the most appropriate in the Springfield's leadership eyes is that that's a budget committee topic presentation. So that way the entire budget committee sees it and the council sees it at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I just moved to the county.
Oh yeah, no problem. So what I did want to throw in there before, and I'm not even sure if it's an appropriate time, but maybe it is because Julie brought it up. is that and actually Janine did also in regards to the methodology. So I have an idea for methodology that would be, I know it would be acceptable for Springfield to discuss it with our finance director. So that way it's not an every year battle. So what Springfield was looking at saying, okay, we don't understand your methodology, but this is what we see. We have a our general fund inflation rate that's governed by tax receipts, and that those rates, the tax receipt rates, if it mirrored the increase, whatever increase in the general fund from tax receipts that the city experiences, could be increased in the dues. So if there's, typically it's like, 3% tax rate, and if it goes up to 3.12 or 3 point whatever, then that would be a justifiable increase in dues. But to have the increase greater than what's coming in, then it's a losing proposition each year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Chair Joe, who has those? Is that Nate?
Nate does.
Nate, okay.
But that's a formula that actually could work very well for all the cities, because all the cities are faced with the same laws and they're faced with the same caps. And you can only get so much from your tax rate, and you can't get any more than your allowed tax rate or cap tax rate. Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Well, I like your idea, Joe. The problem is we won't achieve our maintenance of effort in that regard. And this is the key thing, is then the whole thing goes out the window because we're not managing those expectations with the state and with the Fed. So as much as I love your idea, I don't think that that's something that's necessarily going to be viable. The one thing I will say is it concerns me also a little bit about the services. Do cities now start not calling in complaints because they don't want to see the increase in revenue as well? I'm really reluctant, to add the service piece. Absolutely, I think raising it to meet the state's, expectation right now. So the alternative one, I don't support that because we already have them accepting our lower rate. So I wouldn't intentionally give them more money. But at the same time, maintaining what percentage we are doing, I think we're going to have to do. And so I do support that. So I guess I would do the second one with a real concern about the service piece.
Well, yeah, and I see exactly what you're saying, but you have to remember is that, for example, the cities don't see anything back from LRAPA. The county gets it. The county doesn't disperse it to the cities. And I know we brought this up with Joe before. It's been crickets. So if there is something in return to the city's investments, then I think it's a much easier pill to swallow. But I can tell you on an alternative one, with Springfield going from 31,000 to 47,000, it's probably not going to happen. So there's not, yeah, go ahead.
Chair Joe, I do want to put this out there. One of the things about what we would like to do, City of Springfield actually reached out to us and they asked us to get rid of that in kind with Mary Bridget, and they would like to bill us directly for Mary Bridget's time. So while it does look like there is a large increase for Springfield, they would actually cover that with the revenue that they're going to turn around and bill us for Mary Bridget's time. And we're actually working on a contract right now to start on July 1st for Mary Bridget. And they're the ones that actually reached out to me to figure out how to get rid of this in-kind net service type thing.
Right. And I was one that blew in their horn about that as well.
Yeah, so they've actually asked us, they're expecting us to sign a contract for legal services on July 1st.
So, and I heard that too, and I understand what the reason for the bump, and it's in a payback situation, whatever, but I was when you were asking if I had any questions, that was who I was on the phone with Nate. So if you could reach out to him and start that discussion, because there's some pushback and I don't completely understand what and why for.
Okay.
But I want to make sure that that's known, so no one's getting blindsided.
Yeah.
Janine, go ahead.
On the in-kind contributions, was the city of Eugene also providing in-kind? I guess I'm trying to understand
Well-
why the difference there. I can understand where the Springfield change is coming from, but anyway.
Yeah, so City of Eugene, so long story, from what I understand, and it only made sense to me because I came from there. Glenn Klein was the original attorney that apparently when this in-kind services happened, Glenn Klein was LRAPA's rep. And as Glenn Klein transitioned out, they were using Mary Bridget. When Mary Bridget went to City of Springfield, they kept Mary Bridget. Since I've gotten here, and I believe since Steve's gotten here, we have not received in-kind services from City of Eugene or Lane County that we can find. I believe there was some HR work that maybe Lane County was doing. But when we spoke with City of Eugene folks, they actually were unaware of the agreements. And I've been through every file, cannot find any documentation, and our agreement does say there should be documentation. We have
Yeah.
documentation of Mary Bridget because we use her all the time.
Sure. I mean, that makes sense. And that's why I was asking, because I couldn't think of what that would look like. I feel like many years ago, we got some legal support from the city, and
Mhm.
maybe it was like Sharon Hobart Hart. I mean, anyway, it was a very long time ago. So that helps. And then, so do all of these, do both options basically change the in-kind into just actual cash investment? Like no matter what, that's gone out of the equation.
We would like to do that because it's really hard. I mean, 2008 seems like it was yesterday, but it was really a long time ago. And it's really hard to keep bringing
Sure.
up saying this is the way it was. So what Steve and I talked about was just getting a methodology and a base so that in 10 years when we leave, we don't have a 30-year quote agreement that nobody remembers.
Sure.
That's
So,
what we're
but that is reflected in both alternative 1 and 2, the removal of in-kind. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
And then the 8.3% CPI is like the Western A CPI for.
Yeah, it was,
23?
yeah, current. And so what happened last year is we did that in November, and then by December, January, it had dropped. So I used the lower amount.
Okay.
So.
Steve,
Yeah, and either alternative at
Mhm.
least gets us out of the woods from what board member Mike Fleck was saying about maintenance of effort. So we
Sure.
at least preserve that, because we'd be foolish not to take the 105 money from EPA.
Sure. And then the other thing that's just surprising to me is that I had no idea, and this has never been, Mike, maybe you remember, but I don't ever remember us being able to just set the base level at arbitrarily at whatever number. We've just always looked at what the base was and change it by CPI and population. So it's interesting to me that we could just take that number and pop it up to 263. That I've just never heard that before. And that's why I was asking about if there's any constraints on our methodology in the enabling language in ORS, because I just really don't, it's so prescriptive in other ways. I'm just amazed that it doesn't speak to local dues in any way or shape or form.
Okay, well, I'm gonna do that research. The reason I put the state match up here is in my research of previous from what Nasser had for dues, this was actually one of the recommendations was to match the state. And I thought, okay, well, let's put that up there as just another way to do it. And I will work with Mary Bridget on this ordinance and see, but her and I are really focused on this IGA. And that is actually highlighted in there. So I'll see what I can find.
go ahead, Mike.
So ORS 468A.175 state A says, and item B says, any air quality control program exercising functions operated by a regional authority shall be eligible for state aid in the amount not to exceed 50% of the locally funded annual operating cost thereof, including any federal funds for which the program may be entitled. And I'm sure there's more of it than that, but that was just a quick, while we're in the meeting, research. So I don't know that. And I'm sorry, Janine, what was your other part of your question?
I just couldn't, I was looking for it too, and I couldn't find it. So thank you for doing that research. I just was saying that that ORS is so prescriptive in other places that I just assumed it spoke to how local dues were collected. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't running afoul of that ORS language. So thank you for.
Yeah,
checking
and I'm
that
not
out.
certain how the federal and state mix to make what we're required, but you're right, that 260 some odd amount does seem higher than it was, the expectation in the past. So I don't know the actual answer to that, because this does seem like a very large increase.
Well, it was also part of that conversation where it was randomly decided to make up money lost during a recession, which I still to this day can't figure out that method or the thinking behind that or the thought process, but that's water under the bridge as far as I know.
So what happened is, and this is Janine and I were really active going to all the jurisdictions, because basically there was talk about just not funding LRAPA at all anymore.
I remember the history behind it.
Yeah.
Totally. But
So-
the end result was to just randomly change the dues.
Well, it became what cities were willing to pay. And that's basically, and then we went back to the state and Fed to say, hey, look, we've had an economic turndown. Will you help? Will this satisfy our maintenance of effort? That's the history.
Okay. Anybody want to hit this horse anymore?
Well, I guess I'd just say that I don't know that I'm feeling like there's any consensus about either of these alternatives, and
It's not with me.
so I don't know that we're ready. I'm guessing January is not, it's okay to do this in January, but I also don't know how we would get to a better place of being ready to say, pull the trigger on one or the other. So I guess my question to the board members is, so that we don't start from scratch in January, what would help us get to a place of feeling more comfortable with a decision? And maybe there's some sideboards that this group would like to put out there so the staff have some place to go from here.
I think, and I agree, I can't move forward with what is proposed here without further discussion. So, and I know there's been some good discussion today. And I also know that, for example, I referred Julie to reach out to Nate Bell, our finance director at Springfield, because I was literally on the phone with him and he said, please have her call me. So I think that there needs to be some more background work done by staff to the other cities to talk to the respective folks there to see what's on their folks to get, because everybody's got to feel they have some buy-in and everybody's got to be feeling part of that. They have to feel part of it as opposed to being handed a bill with no rebuttal. So
Right.
There's some more work that needs to be done. And I think it's just communication will go a very long ways. Janine, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So I have one more just basic question that I forgot to ask earlier. So before, and Mike, you always remind us, so Oak Ridge and Cottage Groves have always been paying their full freight where the other three entities were kind of not. And that whole 5% a year or 10% a year was an attempt to try to get the larger partner agencies to get to full freight like the smaller cities were. So that was the whole basis for that. It wasn't arbitrary. There was a theory behind that I think is equitable. In either of these alternatives are all this, I mean, when you do the service element, like how does that whole equity issue, I guess I'm confused I think an end point we wanted to get to was that each of the partner cities were paying an equitable share, right? Versus what they think they can afford to pay. Do we get there on either of these alternatives? I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate. Joe's laughing at me. He's like, starting to sound like the other JP.
So let me say this. If you look, here's another chart. This was a 10-year history. So here's FY23. This is
I
one
can't see what you're showing us.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm actually not showing you anything. I'm just showing
Well,
myself.
you're seeing something.
Travis, are you able to share that document where their 10-year history chart is above? I'm like, it works for me.
That's all that matters, Julie.
I know. I was like, okay, so here's this 10-year history that I have a chart of. If you look at the far right, it's the FY23, which is the 195,111. When I look at that, what I understand is that Eugene, Springfield, and Lane County, that is half. That if you really wanted to look at if 2008 and 9 and all those had never happened, LRAPA would be receiving, and I'd have to do really quick math, but more. And from what I understand, and I'll give you that amount here. So 195,111. Okay. 87,643, 31806, and 61876. That LRAPA every year would be receiving $377,000.
Yeah. I think you answered my question. So this does not kind of reconcile that old. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No,
Thank you.
all this is
Okay.
doing is going, well, City of Springfield kind of brought this up of, hey, we're going to bill you for Mary Bridget.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So basically we have run this way for a long
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
So we know that there's a lot of heartache of this
Mm-hmm.
recouping and all of that.
Yeah. And it's hard to, after this many years, it's hard to go back.
Yeah. And when we spoke with City of Eugene and
Mhm.
new players, right? They had no idea some of these agreements. So there's a couple decision points. Methodology. Are we comfortable adding service or are we not? Do you want to see methodology a different way or not? I can do more research on the dollar amount. I can tell you that number 2, alternative 2, is about the minimum, because again, if we go below our MOE, it's really going to be hard. And this past year, we came very, very close because we had an open position that took me a long time to get filled. So that's how close we are to our MOE. So I'm happy to do a bunch of research more and give you guys more alternatives, just with some direction so that in January, we can get some numbers to get to our partners.
Go ahead, Steve.
I also wanted to say that, a statement was made earlier about if we raise the partner fee so high that the localities won't be funneling complaints our way. Well, it's not the localities that call us, it's the residents that call us. So they're going to call where they know they can get the results and get their complaints addressed. And LRAPA has a long history of being able to do that to the nth degree, up to that 95%, success rate of investigating that many complaints that we get every year.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I know we're kind of running along on this. So the problem though, Steve, is that if we become so expensive where DEQ will do the same services, albeit they won't be able to put the same amount of resources in. I mean, it won't be the same service by any means. But the problem is we also have to show the cities the value that LRAPA is actually bringing back to them. And if we're arbitrary or we're not looking at that, we could go away. And so I think the key, and that was a real concern back when Janine and I and others were lobbying the cities to show them all of the values. So while you're right, it's the citizens making that impact, but like I said, we need to be responsive to the jurisdictions as well to make sure that we're providing a value. And I think Joe makes a great comment that maybe this is worth re-engaging Lane County about the fees so that there is some sort of, I won't cover the cost, but at least there's some sort of compensation coming back to the jurisdictions who are putting money into the programs.
You mean fines?
But that's what I meant. The fines will be offsetting some of the expenses.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I was just going to say, I don't remember when we talked about this before, but I did have a conversation with Steve Mokraheisky and Greg Rickoff. I won't bore you with the names, but the people over there, and they were amenable to further discussion. So, it wasn't like that. In fact, to them, this was almost a non-issue. It was like, yeah, sure, if we're collecting fines and X percent are from Cottage Grove and, blah. So I think it's just a matter of follow-up. I will reintroduce, as the clock ticks, I will reintroduce the conversation. Steve, I'll coordinate with you. So before this calendar year is out, you can have that conversation with him. I kind of feel like, even though that's not a big deal, it is a big deal. And if that occurs, you will have a much better reception with some of the cities, especially if you can lead with, hey, look what I've done for you.
Joe, you have an absolute excellent point. I doubt the fees come, I mean, in each individual city, heck, a lot of the fees and fines come from out of the cities, but fact of the matter is, it's something that's like, hey, we will return to anything that happens in your jurisdiction. We'll return those receipts to you. We don't know how much it is, but we want to be completely open to you. And we don't want to seem as though we're just money grabbing. We want to be fair. And that goes a huge way.
I agree.
I
I'm
could,
sorry, Julie, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we could actually put that as part of the fee calculation or the due calculation.
Well, rather than part of a recalculation right now, how about we get a statement signed by the county to that effect?
Right.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, instead of sending it back to the county in future years in one single check, it could actually be a reduction on
No,
the,
it would be the county that would have to take the money.
or the
in.
county,
Right.
okay,
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
then
we
the
looked
county
at-
gives it
yeah.
up.
We
Yeah.
looked into that because by statute, they have to receive all of it.
Okay,
So,
and then
Yeah.
they pass it back.
right.
So my request here, Joe, if I may.
Yeah.
Here's an action item. Steve or Julie or whoever does it, write a draft statement to that effect. Send it to me. Let's go back and forth. I will carry it to the county. How's that?
Okay. That sounds good. I mean, just so you know, the ballpark enforcement fines vary from year to year, but it averages between 20 and 50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Right. Not much.
Not much.
No.
It is this, trust me, I think I can carry it. This would be a fiscally insignificant, symbolically significant thing for the county to do. So get off our butts and do it.
So, yep. Go ahead, Janine.
So in terms of another version of this that I would like to see is just like an alternative 2B or 2A that's the CPI population for all of the entities without the service component, just to see what that looks like from a difference perspective. That'd be helpful for me.
Janine, I think, gosh, I already forgot who's, Joe brought that up, is I think we should look at the other entities out there that are benefiting from LRAPA services that are paid for by these cities here.
Right.
So,
Well, again, I think that, what makes a partner agency is
Right.
defined in that ORS. And I think, I don't know what Oak Ridge's population is relative to Coburg or Junction City, but I thought it was all population based, but I'm gonna admit that I haven't read the ordinance recently, so.
what?
Neither.
Okay.
So unprepared for this
Let's-
meeting.
Let us please move forward. Okay, we are way behind.
Yep.
Next item, please. Is there anything else
Yes.
on this topic? I don't want to leave anybody hang firing. Okay, thank you very much. Great conversation. Next item, please.
So we're on old business, I believe, board,
That's
Chair Joe.
correct. Number 10.
So all this here is a placeholder and an idea for a work session topic. The new board member orientation is timely, knowing that coming up, going into the January board meeting, when a new board members are considered or being reviewed, and then reviewing that versus the board authority and versus LRAPA responsibilities may be timely. When it comes to having that discussion, I don't have anything more to add there, other than the fact that between now and the board meeting in January, we can develop what the sideboards are on that discussion to send to the board in advance, if that would be helpful, so that we can keep it more focused than some of our discussions we've had here today even.
Sounds good to me. Anybody else have any comments? All right. Sounds good, Steve. Item number 11, any new business from anyone? Mike, go ahead.
So I just wanted to report, it looks like it's pretty likely I'm going to be reelected. But it also looks pretty likely we're going to have a new mayor. Mayor sets the appointments with the approval of the council. So I will certainly request coming back to LRAPA, but it's not certain. So I think we'll know in January whether I'm going to continue here or not, but I just figured I'd report that real quick.
Congratulations, Mike. Yeah, I saw those numbers, pretty strong. So we'll wait to hear from you when you find out. Joe, go right ahead.
Thank you. This is really about the only time I can thank you all. So I would really like to just take a minute and do that. 4 years ago, Mike Fleck probably spent 3.5, 4 hours with me, giving me an orientation to LRAPA. And Mike, consistently through this, I can't thank you enough. I felt that, I've really had a partner with you arm in arm, just really looking for the good of the agency. I also was really educated by Janine. I mean, Janine has a background and history, especially in terms of process methodology, that also gave me a foundation to hopefully contribute something. I don't know if all of you know, but Joe and I actually are brothers. But I mean that, and I really want to thank you all. It's been a pleasure. It really has, and an honor. I'm approaching an age where I know I only look 50, but I'm approaching a point where you get a different perspective on some of this stuff. And it's the human relationships for me that are meaningful and carry on no matter what I happen to be doing. Howard, I'm sorry we never had a chance to meet personally. Travis, I want to talk to you more about diabetes one of these days. But and I think I feel very proud that one, under Joe Piscineri's leadership for the last few years, I think this organization is in a really good place, especially given the history of the last few years. And I think we have I'm very pleased with the leadership we have, both in Steve and in Julie. And so I don't have another opportunity to say this. So thank you all so very much.
My turn. Now that you open the door, Joe, it's been so awesome. I know I probably flew around more than what should be acceptable, but it's this stuff, working with agencies, working with people like you and everybody else on the board and whatnot, is huge in my life. And that you have been an absolute amazing brother partner, and that I feel absolutely a total trust with you, and we can talk and be completely frank and honest with each other without any doubt.
That's for sure.
and it's great. And someday we'll meet up and share some beverages and maybe even a camping trip. So anyway, anybody have anything else at all? All right, I am going to happily adjourn this meeting. Everyone have a good evening. Take care.
I
Have a
love
good
ending on that high note. And Joe, thank you for the kind words.
Oh, I meant them very sincerely.
Yeah. This is where I really miss not being in person, because I could just jump up and give it a big old Italian hug, but I can't now. So.
And a kiss on both cheeks.
That's it.
Yeah.
And a little bit of rub of olive oil. There you go. All right.
Okay.
Everyone take care. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.